They say open source registries are in financial peril, a co founder of an open source security foundation warned after inspecting their books. And it's not just the bandwidth costs that are killing them. That's a quote from Michael Windsor, who's a co founder of Alpha Omega, which is a Linux Foundation project to help secure the open source supply chain. We've definitely seen like a growing number of supply chain attacks, for example, especially in like the NPM node ecosystem, where there's like so many dependencies on other programs that are in a lot of programs that developers are making these days, and they're not vetting them all, of course, because there's sometimes thousands of them, and any one of those dependencies can introduce some sort of vulnerability, either intentionally or not, into your code base. There's not much that can really be done about it because, exactly like this article says, nobody is really contributing to the financial side of these registries. This is a broader issue in open source, I think would be my takeaway from this, because at the end of the day, the majority of open source projects have this problem where they're generally taken for granted, whether it's the software or the infrastructure, but they all have real costs associated with them. And all of the huge tech companies that are taking advantage of these programs or projects are not contributing back in a way that would increase their security or improve them in some ways.
So the person who gave this talk said that they mocked up a Family Feud style game to help attendees guess the 10 biggest expenses for open source registries. Bandwidth was the number one cost at about 25% of total expenses. Storage was 18%, compute was 15%, and battling malware was 12%. New feature development barely registers at 2%, and documentation wasn't even in the top 10, which I do believe sometimes. And also just like the sheer size of these, he estimated it could cost $5 million to $8 million a year to run a major registry the size of crates.io. This is the kind of stuff that you don't normally see or think about. This is the stuff that's like way, way in the background that like the developers building it use this stuff and you never even see it. So this is like way up the supply chain. I really want to back up what you said is it really disappoints me that some people have this attitude that like money is just this evil, evil thing when it comes to open source. These are real costs that people have to pay. I can't tell my landlord I'm not going to pay rent today, but I'll show you how to use Signal. Like, that's just not how it works. At the very end, he says, money is a rarely discussed aspect of open source. The software is supposed to just be free like beer, right? Open source may indeed be free like beer, but no one enjoys a frothy lager served chock full of parasites and bacteria. So maybe we should all get used to ponying up at the bar. And again, I've seen some where like it's literally donation. It's like they don't even paywall anything. They're like, please donate. And people are like, oh, that's really tacky. And it's like, dude, what the heck? We really need to change this attitude of like expecting everything to be free. And I think it's great that there are so many free resources, but
I think this is a very challenging problem for these open source projects to solve, though, especially because a lot of those costs that you mentioned, like the obvious ones like bandwidth, all of these projects get a ton of donations of like infrastructure or bandwidth specifically. Well, donations like that can cover a lot of the bills. Because of that, it's very easy to overlook the hidden costs, like this article mentions, like security and malware scanning, for example. That is a real cost, and that can't be easily donated as easy as it is to donate server space or bandwidth for a giant company like Fastly or Cloudflare. Clearly, a donation model isn't enough. Like, if any of these paywall sorts of situations happened where these registries tried to recoup their losses, other entities would spin up their own mirrors or alternatives because, again, the technical stuff is really easy. It's the security stuff that's hard. And then if the ecosystem is fragmented, all of those different mirrors or registries could have their own security problems. What you do about that, I don't know. This could just be a fundamental issue with all of this open source stuff.
yeah, and I think that's kind of why I wanted to talk about this one this week is just it's a friendly reminder that just everything we've been saying, open source is in a really fragile space and there's no easy answers, but it's something we want to make sure that people are aware of as best we can.